very much. We'll take questions on this first and then broader.
So the Aussie question.
On this, sure.
Yes, that National Cabinet meeting you referred to, if memory serves me correctly, extended the GST top-up deal and agreed to lift the Commonwealth proportion of public hospital funding in return for the states agreeing to take over foundational supports for the NDIS. Is this money a part of that, and is it conditional if the states, which I understand haven't actually come on board yet on foundational agreements, don't meet it? Do they get this $1.7 billion?
Well, in fact, what we're seeing is really constructive engagement from the states in the reform of the NDIS. And this agreement, to put it in real dollar terms of what it means, Commonwealth funding, the current financial year, is $30.19 billion to the states. Next year, it will be $33.91 billion. So this is a really important agreement in recognition that we need to do more, in recognition of how important this is. To everyone hears stories about the delays that occur in emergency departments, the pressure that our public hospitals are under. What this funding will do, when combined with the other measures we're doing to stop people having to go to an emergency department, that's what the 1 million visits plus to urgent care clinics is all about. Yeah.
Donald Trump says that the US...
Health. We've got a $1.7 billion announcement, and then I'm happy to take others, but sure.
Phil's question. So the states are going to get access to this $1.7 billion without having to do any of the commitments around the foundational supports. And if that's the case, doesn't it seem like the states have just run down the clock on talks and got what they wanted anyway in terms of hospital funding for at least this first year? No,
that's not right. States and territory governments are engaged, including on foundational reform, in putting in place the mechanisms, and the discussions have been really constructive. Those measures are being put in place. Today, as Mark has said, the WA government goes into caretaker mode. We have managed to get this agreement signed up. State and territory jurisdictions are very positive about this, and indeed there's been ongoing dialogue between myself on a bilateral basis. I've spoken to a range of premiers and chief ministers over recent days in order to get this across the line.
Can I add to that,
Sure.
perhaps, that the Prime Minister's right. The Commonwealth's very satisfied with progress on NDIS rule reform and also the development of foundational supports. But states and territories understand that the conclusion of a 5-year deal, which is what they're after and what was committed by the Prime Minister at the National Cabinet meeting in December 2023, remains tied to that NDIS reform process continuing as it would. And so this is a 1-year rollover. It does not deliver exactly what the states would have got in the first year of a 5-year agreement. The negotiation of the 5-year agreement continues between jurisdictions and remains tied to positive progress on NDIS reform.
One of the biggest issues facing public hospitals has been the mass resignation of psychiatrists in New South Wales. What's your view on the way that situation's evolved, and will this funding help?
Well, obviously this will provide additional funding to the New South Wales Government, which is the jurisdiction you're talking about, Natasha, to deal with wage pressure in the system. And there is wage pressure right across the public health system for nurses and for parts of the medical workforce as well. So additional funding obviously enables them to deal with some of those pressures. But the exact wage negotiation you're referring to is obviously a matter for the New South Wales Government. I've made it clear, in my view, that the mass resignation of such an important part of the public health workforce would be really quite catastrophic for a range of consumers and their families and the system more broadly. So encouraging all parties to get back to the table and try to resolve this, but also at the same time voicing my enormous admiration for the work of public psychiatrists. This is one of the toughest jobs in the health system that we have. I want to see that resolved. I'm sure everyone in New South Wales does as well.
How many more questions have we got on this? Can I get an indication? Just so 1, 2, and there was one over here. Okay, so we'll do those 3 and then we'll open up more broadly.
Sure.
There you go.
So we've just seen today that there's been increasing blowouts in state budgets, that the ratings agencies are threatening to downgrade states. Are you worried that over the time the federal government's going to have to pick up an even larger tab for state governments. Is this just the start of a much larger funding from the federal coffers?
Yeah. Well, a tenet of our hospital funding agreements, going back to the agreement struck by Prime Minister Gillard, has been funding growth caps that the Commonwealth insists on. So that gives us control in terms of our fiscal exposure, but also ensures that there's a lever there to encourage efficient delivery of public hospital services by states. That remains the position of the Commonwealth. It remains a central part of our negotiating position, was very clearly articulated in the agreement, if I can call it that, from the National Cabinet meeting in December 2023. That also is a part of the NDIS agreement between states and territories. I guess what today's announcement reflects is the growth funding cap in place right now is not fit for purpose, given the price growth in the system, particularly through wages growth, but also the activity growth. We're seeing in a system that's under enormous pressure because of those things I talked about, an ageing population, more complex chronic disease. So yes, we will maintain disciplines that control fiscal exposure from the Commonwealth, and we'll do that going forward.
Yeah, and then
Commonwealth funding to public hospitals increases every year because hospitals cost more to run. Every year, hospital inflation, health inflation runs higher than household inflation, and there's a 6.5% cap in acknowledgement of that. Is this just business as usual? Is this just the annual increase, or does it go beyond the 6.5% cap?
no, well, could I indicate very clearly, this is additional funding. This is additional funding to states and territories that will make an enormous difference. And if you look at New South Wales, for example, the extra one-off additional funding is $407 million. In the media release, you'll have all the state and territory figures for all 8 jurisdictions.
Steph just asked my question, so
Okay.
if I may, can I please take you on to the Middle East? I mean, this is a
Sure,
huge breaking
sure.
story. We would be very keen to hear your reaction. Donald Trump, the US president, says the US will take over and own the Gaza Strip. Do you support that position, Prime Minister?
Well, I've said before that I don't intend to have a running commentary on the President of the United States' statements.
This is a major foreign policy move, though.
Hang on, it's not a dialogue, it's...
Well, I think it is.
Well, if you let me answer, what I would say is that Australia's position is the same as it was this morning, as it was last year, and it was 10 years ago, and it was under the Howard government. The Australian government support, on a bipartisan basis, a 2-state solution in the Middle East.
But he's blown that apart, hasn't he, Prime Minister, with his statement? Because, you know, the US is such a big hand in this. Do you think what he's proposing is in accordance with international law? And can you confirm you're considering mandatory minimum sentences for terrorism offences in Australia?
That was a smoother segue than that by the SBS, so congratulations. Congratulations, Andrew. On the first, our position remains the same. We want to see, as have Australian governments for a long period of time, going back to John Howard's comments about the need to find a settlement to the Palestinian question. We have had a long-standing bipartisan position for a 2-state solution. On the issue of anti-Semitism, we have a very clear position. I want to see people who are perpetrators of this, what are crimes, hunted down, put in the clink and dealt with. That's what I want, and we'll provide all of the authorities the resources to do so.
A question on anti-Semitism, PM. There's a bill before Parliament now on hate speech. There's an amendment from the crossbench on making it a criminal offence to promote hatred. Do you see any merit in that amendment against promoting hatred?
Well, there's a range of amendments, and I understand. I, quite frankly, have been dealing with premiers and chief ministers. I'm sure there'll be more than one amendment from more than one crossbencher. We'll deal with that. We're engaging constructively. I want to see as much support as possible for the legislation, and to do it in a way that gathers that. I don't think this should be an issue of political disagreement. we saw yesterday the Parliament come together and unanimously support a resolution.
Prime Minister, there's been 2 people arrested in Perth today for the anti-Semitic graffiti that happened there over the weekend. Just following up those comments you said just before, these 2 people appear to be Australian citizens. Are you aware if there have been any non-citizens who've been convicted of anti-Semitic crimes over the past 6 months, years, sort of since it's been going on? And how are we keeping tabs on whether the people's visas should be cancelled?
Well, you've answered your own question.
Well, for these 2.
You've answered your own question. I'm not aware of any non-citizens, but in terms of the arrests, there have been a range of arrests made, including under Operation Avalite and by state and territory jurisdictions, and what that indicates is that the police are getting on with the job that they have, and that's a good thing.
Do you acknowledge that what President Trump has said today does little to further progress a 2-state solution, and have you spoken to the President since his inauguration?
Again, multiple questions. I refer to my previous answers, which are that Australia supports, on a bipartisan basis, a 2-state solution in the Middle East.
Prime Minister, you have been consistent about the need for countries to follow international rules. You've argued whether it's China or Russia against blatant land grabs. Would what Donald Trump is proposing fit that category?
I'm not going to have a running commentary on statements by the President of the United States. I've made that very clear.
Prime Minister, this is no ordinary statement, though. This is a potentially history-changing statement, and there's a real prospect that the US will ask allies like Australia to support it. Are you prepared to send Australian military into the Gaza in some sort of coalition of the willing peacekeeping mission? Is Australia prepared to help fund the rebuilding of Gaza?
When it comes to our position, we have not received any request regarding the rebuilding of Gaza. What we have said, though, clearly, we've supported a ceasefire, we've supported hostages being released, and we've supported aid getting into Gaza. There is a need to do that, and Australia is willing to assist getting aid into Gaza to provide that support. We have done so. That is consistent with what Australian governments have always done, which is to provide support.
On Donald Trump again, it's not just what he said, it's the finer detail. He says he wants to resettle Palestinians away. He said he wanted to turn the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East. Can you at least concede that is not conducive of Middle East peace?
My job is to give Australia's position, and Australia's position is to support a bipartisan position, one where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace and security. Thanks very much.
As Fiji said, Australia regularly speaks out about violations of international laws, Myanmar, China, Russia. If we don't speak clearly about our position on whether this is a violation of international law, doesn't that undermine our credibility when we're speaking on those other issues?
Not at all. What I've said, though, is that we will be consistent as we are. But I've also said that I'm not going to, as Australia's Prime Minister, give a daily commentary on statements by the US President. My job is to support Australia's position. My job here today, I'll tell you what Australians will be concerned about. They're concerned about Medicare, they're concerned about education, they're concerned about whether they have access to free TAFE, the debate that we've just had. I'll continue to engage in that. We will, of course, what we do is we take considered positions when matters of international affairs are raised, and we do so in a manner that is consistent with Australia's values. And I can't be stronger than saying what Australia's bipartisan position has been for a long period of time, across multiple governments, across many decades. And of course the United Nations, when Australia played historically a very important role in the creation of the State of Israel. It's something that we and the Labor Party and my government and other governments consistently since then have supported. But those governments have also supported what happened then, which was the creation of two states, not just one. And that remains my position, and it has been a bipartisan position up to this point. Thanks very much.